is that? Got it.
Recording in progress.
My head gonna be a new one?
No, you're good. It's a great line of sight. Just don't keep it over straight.
Yeah.
I know what they look like.
All right, good morning. Welcome to the Personnel Board meeting. It is Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. It is 8:02 a.m. and we have 3 out of our 4 members present. Just let me know if Tom comes in on the Zoom at any point during the meeting. First order of business is public comment. Is there any public comment today? We will entertain comment on agenda items as we go. Okay, I'm going to skip administrative business because I know we have a few people here for different reasons. So we're going to go through each of those first, and then we'll come back to the meeting minutes at the end. I'm going to go to request from Kelly O'Brien. So 4A, request from Kelly O'Brien, Building Department to reset salary under SAP Section 11, transfers and promotions. So I'll ask where'd the town administrator go? Mark, do you want to just provide the background here to the Personnel Board of what the request is, and then I'll see if Ms. O'Brien wants to speak and then have the board deliberate?
Sure. I assume I have to use the mic for Sam.
Yes.
So the request before the Personnel Board this morning is from Ms. O'Brien in the Building Department. She's seeking to reset her salary under SAP Section 11, transfers and promotions. The request before you, Ms. O'Brien had moved up to, had expressed interest and had moved up to the town clerk's office as the deputy clerk. That fit didn't work. And in less than a week had requested that she be allowed to go back to her position, and we were able to allow that to happen, and she returned back, I believe, 10 days later. And per the bylaw, she is seeking to be paid the same amount in her current position as she was making in the deputy clerk's office. So that was... It's about, I think, a $3 an hour difference.
And do you have, or we'll pull it up, the different grades of the two positions?
Yeah, the grade for the building office is grade 4. The town clerk position grade is grade 6. So those are the differences.
And was it 10 calendar days or 10 working days?
Calendar. I believe calendar. I'd have to check the date specifically, but it was about a week.
Mr. O'Brien, do you want to either present anything additional beyond what Mr. Purple has stated as a request or anything along those lines?
Good morning. My name is George Bonan. I'll be representing Ms. O'Brien for the purposes of this hearing. I would just like to briefly point out some dates, and that is, first I'd like to read off of the offer letter presented to Ms. O'Brien, moving her or offering her the deputy town clerk position. That letter was written February 18th. It was effective, the salary was effective as of March 3rd, and Ms. O'Brien had made her transfer back to the building department on or about March 12th. So that shows that she was in the position. I don't think there's any dispute there, and she had the higher grade salary. And I think it also shows that she was clearly transferred back to the building department as well. I'd also like to just reference paragraph 11, of course, of the personnel bylaws, and it clearly says any employee transferred to a position of lower range or rate of, an employee transferred to a position with a lower range or rate of pay shall enter it at the rate of pay of the employer's previous position, which was around $35, as you know, or at the maximum rate of the grade for the position, whichever is lower. And the maximum rate for the grade is around 55, I want to say, for grade 4, which would be the building administrator title. It doesn't make any mention as to why the employee is transferred. It just says transferred. So to me, it's pretty cut and dry that Ms. O'Brien is deserving, for a lack of a better word, of the higher of the two pays. As this, although only 10 calendar days, it fits squarely within the bylaw process of transfers and promotions. I think with that, I have nothing further to add.
So I am going to pull up,
Thank you.
someone already has it, I'm going to pull up and read verbatim the section that we're talking about, just to make sure that everyone is working with the same information here as we deliberate this. I would also ask Brian to confirm the max pay rate for grade 4 while we do that, because I think that was just referenced and that number does not jive with my numbers. The max is 35. Yeah, and you had mentioned, I think you said 55?
56, and this is grade 4, correct?
Grade-
We're discussing, we're talking about grade 4?
Yeah.
So I,
You gotta, every time you speak, you gotta come to the
Yep.
mic. It might be easier to stay over there or stay there until we
yes, of course.
finish this matter.
So I have printed in my hand the personnel bylaw entitled the Salary Administration Plan. It was revised as of March 23rd, 2024. Is that what we're working off of?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would have been March 24 town meeting. Yep, that makes sense.
If you flip to page 12, the Schedule A is there, which shows the grading chart.
Mhm.
And let me just double check. And Building Administrator 1 is a grade 4.
Yes.
And if you go to grade 4 and go down the column, and maybe I'm reading this wrong, but the bottom number is 5621. No, you're going vertical. So I'm supposed to go horizontal?
Yeah, so you want to look at the line A4 and go across. So the max would be a step 15, which is $35.
This is,
an
if I may, it becomes, it's a little confusing because in the previous page, it says grade, and then it doesn't, it says 1, 2, 3, doesn't say A, A1, A2, A3. Then when you go to the schedule, it says grade, and then 4. And then, to me, I mean, I'm understanding now, but it's very confusing and somewhat misrepresentative, but understanding that now. So you're saying the grade is A4 as opposed to 4?
Yeah, A4 is the line that you would refer to. We have not, so here's, I appreciate that it may be confusing, but we only have 9 grades listed in the chart above, and you have 15 going across.
Yes, you're
So
absolutely right.
that's,
Okay.
so, in each thing going across represents what we call a step.
Okay,
So
yeah.
maybe for future SAPs, we can put steps at the top and grade
you.
down the side. But I think just to make sure we're working with the same facts, grade A4 has a max.
Of 35.
In this calendar year,
Yes.
it will look different
Sure.
on July 1st, but in the current time, the max of that grade is $35.
Absolutely. All right, and now that I see that, I apologize and thank you for pointing that out, but be that as it may, it's still $35, which is more than the 31 and some odd change that Ms. O'Brien is currently offered.
Okay,
Thank you.
so.
I'll just stay here.
Yeah, just stay. So I'm going to read from the transfer section, now that I left that. just so everyone's working with the same information. So I believe we were talking about 8B. An employee transferred to a job with a lower range or rate of pay shall enter it at the rate paid for the previous position or at the maximum for the job, whichever is the lower, provided the Personnel Board approves. The employee shall have a right to appeal this decision in writing to the Personnel Board, which shall confer with the employee, the department head, and the Select Board, or the designated appointee, or the appropriate commissioners or trustees, and shall decide the matter. Everyone agree that that's the section we're referring to here? Okay. So I guess I just have a few questions, just kind of being new to the matter. And did any town employee, whether it be department head, town administrator, ask Ms. O'Brien to return to the building department, or did she seek to return on her own after the position was not working in the town clerk's office?
Sure. I'd like Ms. O'Brien, if you wouldn't mind just coming up and answering that.
Hi.
I-
I returned on my own. I went to Ms. Hale and I asked her if I could return to my previous position.
So I guess my follow-up question would be, town frequently has openings, right? What is to prevent any other employee from applying into a position, getting that position tomorrow, whether deciding on their own or at that department head's, that it's not working out, and essentially getting, I'll just use your rough math that you gave earlier in your presentation, a $3 an hour pay increase for that sort of situation.
Sure. And typically it's verbiage and bylaws. I don't mean to, sound combative, but I rely completely on the bylaws here, which don't have a requirement or requisite in that paragraph, in paragraph 11, the one we just read. It just says a transfer, which I clearly see is what happened here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the only complicating item here is we have multiple appointing authorities, right? The town clerk was the appointing authority for the position that he had posted for the deputy clerk, and then the select board was the appointing authority for the building department. My understanding is there's never a resignation from any of these roles.
Did you officially resign? No.
No.
Okay. Are there other questions or comments?
No, you asked the question. I was wondering if you had left on your own and just decided to go back.
Mike,
Oh,
just repeat what you said.
sorry. You asked the question. I wanted to know if you had made the decision on your own to go to the building department, from the building department to the town clerk, and then if you had decided to go back.
Yes, Mr. Haggerty had approached me for the position before it was even posted. And after reviewing the description, I felt that I could handle it. So I went up there. After a week, I realized it wasn't a perfect fit. So I approached Ms. Hale. I asked her if I could go back to my other position if it was still open. She said it was. It needed to go in front of the select board for approval. And then they approved it on March 12th.
Thank you.
What was the hourly rate in the town clerk's office? I've got the appointment slip for the building administrator, but I don't have any.
The town clerk position was a SAP grade A6, starting at $34.76 an hour, and assuming a successful performance evaluation on July 1st, I would move to a step 6, would be $36.52 an hour.
So which rate are you seeking in the building department?
$34.76 with the July increase of $36.52 an hour.
Did you receive a performance evaluation from the town clerk's office?
No, I did not.
Okay, so even if we were so inclined to grant the $34 amount, which would be the FY24 pay rate, I would think we would need a performance evaluation from the town clerk's office to substantiate the pay raise under that.
Or if I may, it would make more sense if she received a performance evaluation from her current supervisor. It wouldn't make sense receiving one from the town clerk at this point.
But you're trying to get paid at the town clerk's grade.
Correct, but that's pursuant to paragraph 11 of the bylaws. It doesn't make,
Subject to the personnel board approval.
of course, yes, I'm discussing strictly her performance review of her current position.
Okay. Go ahead, John.
Where are you getting the 3652?
May I come and show you this letter? May I bring this to you?
It's the offer letter from the town clerk. So that would be the the 3652 is next year's grid.
I've got the fiscal year '26 grid we're talking about next year.
Yep.
A4,
Well, it would be A6, A6.
oh, A6?
That's the question, is whether Ms. O'Brien should be in A4 or A6 for FY, well, currently and then into FY '26. Go ahead, Doreen.
So we're looking at her going back to the building department, which is a grade 4. So
Correct.
what is the impact if we take her from the town clerk's office at a grade 6, at her request to go back to a grade 4, and pay her in a grade 6? I don't think we can do that.
Well, I
Can we
think
do that?
they are proposing, we can because of the language in there. I think there are other obstacles that would have to be overcome, such as a budget was approved using the A4, and whether this continues in perpetuity. I'm candidly stuck on the fact that I think the intent of the language is if, for example, the town administrator or any other appointing authority needed to move an employee around because of job changes, like, let's just say the town eliminated a position somewhere, but we had an amazing employee sitting somewhere. I view this language as the town asking the employee. I realize it's open for discussion. I'm not an attorney, but I realize it's open for interpretation. But I view the reason and the intent that that language is there is to allow the appointing authorities in this town to give employees an opportunity to move between departments if needs arise. But I would also acknowledge it's not usually common that someone would go down 2 grades of a position, right, unless extraordinary circumstances exist. I will also denote this same position will be the subject of further discussions in our next agenda items for completely different reasons, because it is a BA position that is coming up for discussion in our next agenda item. So I don't want to confuse the matters, but I think it is important to denote that we're going to talk about this position, albeit it has far greater impact because there are many other individuals in town in that same job classification. I think that is a factor here as well. I do see that Ms. Federoff is here, who obviously is our Labor Council too. Is there anything that the board should be considering based on what you have heard as well?
Sure. Thank you so much, Kate Federoff, Town Council, or Labor Council, whatever I am. Both, exactly. So I would urge the board to, this is a matter of you have discretion whether or not to approve this, right? That's clear within the bylaw. And I think one of the things you should be looking at is equity and that type of thing. So specifically, as Mr. Malinowski indicated, one of the things that the Personnel Board would consider in an unusual circumstance is if there were a need and someone had to fill in, right, for a vacancy or whatever, and the town administrator took a person and moved them to a lower graded position, right, through no fault of their own. What the documentation shows, even by virtue of her own letter, Ms. O'Brien's own letter dated June 8th, she indicates that she approached Ms. Hale and requested to be returned to her old position. And when Ms. Hale responded and said, yes, that position is still open, she said you could go back to your old position at your original rate, right? So that was clear from the outset that there would be a reduction in pay commensurate with the position that she was returning to. And more importantly, that was also indicated in her letter reappointing her to the building department, which rate of pay she would be going to. And she did that with open eyes, essentially, just with the recognition that it wasn't working out in the new position. And she sat in the new position for literally 5 days. So I think she worked 3 of those 5 days and took the other 2 off. And so this was real, no loss in equity, I would suggest, for the board. Other than that, the documentation speaks for itself, and you do have discretion under the bylaw to approve or disapprove.
Does Tom have any questions online? Just tell him to raise his hand.
Good morning, everybody. Yes. Just to clarify, we, the Personnel Board does have this discretion. Can we, Jason, help me out, can we do, we have discretion, but are we able to approve this without going back to the current supervisor of the department to ask that supervisor to do an updated personnel review for this upcoming fiscal year, and perhaps ask the supervisor to write in the reason for the increase from A4 to A6, which is outside of the current rate for that position, and make an exception, and then come back to us for an approval? Is that procedurally how it works? Or if we approve it today or not approve it, can the supervisor override that?
Ms. Fedorov.
Out of procedure, I sort of need help with that.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm new to this board.
Sure, Tom, and let me see if I understand your question completely, so let me repeat it to you. So are you asking whether or not the board alone decides, or it's subsequently subject to the approval of the department head? And if so, which department head? Is that your question?
That's correct, because we're talking about 2 different departments. We're talking
Sure.
about her old department, and then now the new department. I'm assuming if she's going to stay in the new department, that we would need eventually a personnel evaluation from the new department head.
Right.
And in that, justifying the rate going from the A4 to A6, and point out the fact that that is an extraordinary circumstance, and it is above the regular pay rate in the event that the next position comes in, or if this position becomes vacant again, that we don't want to set the precedence for an A6 position, A6 grade.
Yeah, so I think the answer to that question is this: the discretion lies with this board, right? So the department head can't override your decision. It's not subject to their approval. So if this board were to decide, what you're deciding is whether or not she moves grades, so from A4 to A6, right? And then I would actually agree with Attorney Bonan, that the review for the step raise would be with her existing department head, because she would be, in some senses, red circled. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with that term, but red circled. It used to be called grandfathering, but that's like inappropriate now. So we say red circle, and you have your own kind of rate. And it's not based on your position, it's based on this transfer. And then steps would come naturally after that. And then should Ms. O'Brien retire in the future, it would be returned to the original grade and rate for the incoming person. So today's decision is simply whether or not the 5 or week-long transfer justifies a grade increase of 2 grades. essentially. Is it 2 grades, Jason?
Well, it is 2 grades, but I'm just going to just to make, it says it should be at the rate paid for the previous position or at the maximum rate for the job, whichever is lower. So I think based on our interpretation of the chart, we would go to, if we were to approve this, it would go to, still be an A4.
Max building.
But it would always be an A4, step 15, which would, it's currently $35 an hour. And then subject to the performance review that you're speaking of, it would go to whatever the maximum rate every year of A4, step 15, and as long as Ms. O'Brien is in that position with the town of Southborough.
So she would jump with COLA, because essentially
be
she
a
would be
COLA
maxed out.
increase.
She would get COLAs every year and not COLA plus step because she'd be maxed unless the position were reclassified or regraded, that whole scale.
Does everyone agree with that interpretation of what the rate would be if we approved it?
Yeah, that's correct, Mr. Mellon.
Okay. Mr. O'Brien, do you?
If I may, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
I want to make sure we're working with
Yes.
all the same information, because I don't know where we're going here, so.
Give me
I wanna
one
make sure.
moment. Yes, I would agree with you.
All right, so, yes. You were on. You just turned it off.
Okay. We don't have a job evaluation from either department.
We do. We did, I believe, receive and approve the performance evaluation from the building department at our last meeting for this position. Yeah, we have it. So,
What I'm saying, I'm sorry, what I'm saying is, we have that, I remember, but it doesn't spell out the extraordinary circumstance with the,
yeah, and it wouldn't, and we caveated that when we approved it. I don't necessarily want to go here, but I do think that performance evaluation cannot be consecutive, though, because the person, in this case, Ms. O'Brien, was not in that position during our performance cycle for a period of these 10 calendar days. So the performance evaluation actually should read from July 1st, 2024, up until the date of resignation from the position, and then it should start with the date that she returned to the position up until the end of the performance cycle, which I believe we all agreed would be May 31st of 2025 for this year's review cycle. So, okay. Are we ready to decide where we want to go with this? Is there a motion?
Well, what are we
So
gonna
we have
go
two
to?
there's 2 motions that can be put on the table. That we support Ms. O'Brien's request and are approving her to be reset at A4, but step 15, pursuant to that section of the personnel bylaw. Or the second motion that can be put on the table is that we do not approve the request.
We'll vote it and then I would, we have the motion, we have a request to move her to grade 6 in her current position, which is back with the planning board. I mean, the building department.
So I'm going to move it, I'm going to move it in the affirmative, and just because that's the request we've been asked to action on, I'll give my opinion. You all can give your opinion, and then we'll vote. So I'm going to move that we support Ms. O'Brien's request to be reset to grade A4, so same grade, but reset to step 15 pursuant to the discussion. Is there a second?
Second.
For clarity, I am not in favor of the motion. I'm going to vote no on it. I just think the period of time that elapsed in the position, and because none of it was initiated in terms of the return by any member of the town administration, based on what I have heard and been presented today, solely rests right there. Obviously, I realize Ms. O'Brien was recruited to the new position, it sounds like, but that's not the part that was in question here today. The part is the return to the building department. And I don't have the exact count, but I know in particular, there are a significant number of other individuals in that same exact job description within our SAP. And to use, I believe Ms. Fedorov said the word equity, that is really where my decision is at this point.
I'm also voting no on this. I don't believe she was in that position long enough, and it was her decision to go back to the building department, and she was fully aware of what the grade, step, and the salary was going to be with her returning. So my vote is no.
Any further discussion? All right, we need to do a roll call vote on this. So Tom?
I'm voting for the affirmative to approve, to support that because, well, I don't need to give a reason, right?
Nope. John?
I vote in the affirmative.
Dorian?
No?
No. Motion fails, 2-2.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cal.
Can you make a note, though, for next town meeting? Clearly, there needs to be clarification, just, in your interest of all parties. All right. I'm going to go back and do the minutes, if you just bear with us for like 2 minutes, just so we don't forget to do those. And then I know a lot of you are here for our next agenda item, and we were getting there. So we have 2 sets of meeting minutes in front of us today. The first is May 2nd, 2025. Any comments or questions on those? And June 10th of 2025. Any comments or questions on those? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to move both minutes to approve both minutes as presented. Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second.
Second by Dorian. Any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
John? Aye. Dorian?
Aye.
And I am aye as well. All right. We're going to go back to 4B, which is to approve pay rates effective July 1, 2025. We've received a series of performance evaluations from the library at this point. Were there any questions or comments on those? All right, then I'm going to move that we approve the FY26 pay rates effective July 1, 2025 for both the primary packet and the supplemental packet. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dorian. Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Dorian?
Aye.
And I am aye as well. Okay. Next is review of proposals related to the FY26 compensation and discussion of future alternatives. This is a loaded topic. It's got a bunch of different pieces. I would propose that we deal with each in pieces just to keep us on track. Obviously, we're at this point because town meeting chose not to fund a formal classification study, and we, as a personnel board, continue to feel an obligation to not let this issue rest. In particular, the 2 items that I would propose we take some position on today are related to our tenured employees. I'm not going to define tenure because I think that's a topic for discussion today, but our tenured employees that are in varying roles that are below the midpoint at this point in time, and deciding where and how we get them closer to or above the midpoint, especially given our recent hiring trends that we've been talking about since last summer. The second item of discussion, and I think Mr. Purple did a great job outlining this in his memo, is just the subject of the business administrator roles in the designation of 1 versus 2 that we've heard endless discussions of for many years since the last pay and class survey. So I'd like to note that whatever position the Personnel Board takes on this today, we're not the end game for all of you that are sitting here that may have an opinion on this. There are budgetary implications of any decision we take to change where we were. I can tell you the Select Board is on notice about this discussion, and it will ultimately be up to them to decide how to pursue funding any option. But I do feel like it's important for Personnel Board to kind of be, I'll call it, because we're in baseball season, the leadoff hitter here, and take a strong position and bring it forward to the Select Board for further actioning. In most cases, the roles that we are discussing here are appointed by the Select Board as well, so it's a natural stopping point in terms of how to solve this from a budgetary perspective. And there are obviously strategies that could be utilized in terms of effective dates as well, in terms of that. I also, could foresee members of the community saying, well, why are you doing this outside of a budget cycle? Well, we have to at least take a position on it and propose something. And obviously, town meeting is always the voice of these things. Town meeting approves all budgets, so this will come forward to town meeting if the Select Board desires to effectuate any of these increases that have been proposed, at least in the initial letter, and we'll be able to have their voice there. It just would have been done without paying a third-party consultant to reach some of these conclusions. Everyone good with that so far? Okay. So, you have a question, John?
Microphone. Any changes that we make or whatever, this doesn't have to wait for the annual. It could be a special town meeting in the fall.
I think the Select Board's already said that there's going to be a special town meeting in the fall, so you could fund it there through appropriation or free cash, depending upon the town's position. But you could at least bring it forward at that point. And there would be options as well there of, potentially go retroactive or making it a future date, call it January 1st of 2026. So what I'd like to do is talk about the longevity piece first. And in the packet, Mr. Purple and Mr. Ballantyne, thank you both, and to anyone else that may have behind the scenes been working through this, for such a thoughtful and detailed approach. I know we have received countless emails and verbal inquiries over year plus, right, on this particular topic. And I would advocate that we look at any employee with 7 years of service or greater in the exact same role. So if they were in a role and transferred and it was a different grade, not to kind of go back to the conversation we were just at, I'm literally looking at someone was hired to do a job, it's in grade 6, 7, 8, or any other grade. As long as they've been moving and providing great service to the town, that they should be at no minimum than a step 8. I would advocate the easiest and cleanest way to do this is a January 1st, 2026 cutoff date, because then it gives town meeting full authority as the legislator of the town to weigh the options that are being presented and the rationale behind it. And, but obviously, you could certainly give them an option to make it retroactive too. But again, it's cleaner to always do things on a go-forward basis, but I don't really have a strong view one way or another, other than it's time to deal with this situation that I think we have all long acknowledged is an issue that was created by adding the step system in place, and the fact that the town did not have a step system from about 2013 to 2022, which is when all of these employees that are subject to this were hired, and especially the roles we're talking about, everyone is important to the town and how we function, and how everything gets taken care of on a daily basis that I think is oftentimes behind the scenes for most residents. So I think the employees in the positions in play are listed in the packet. I think the decisions for the board are, one, do we still agree with prior discussion of the board that we want to do something around our long tenured employees in the same role for a period of time? Do we want that period of time to be 7 or 10 years? And do we have a recommended effective date? Like I said, I'm on the 7-year camp, mainly because if they're in year 7 right now, they'll cross into year 8 at some point during this fiscal year. So if you're trying to say 1 year equals a step, that would be how I would equate it. So that's what my position is. I candidly worked with Mark and Vanessa and the team on this to bring something forward for discussion. So I think my views are reflected in the proposal and the options, but need the full personnel board to weigh in.
Also would like to thank Mark, Brian, and anyone else involved in this very well done document presented to us. I am in agreement with starting at the 7-year mark, and we need to fix this. So I think this looks good, and I would like to make it retroactive. Make it as of January, but I would like it to be retroactive. Some of these people have waited long enough for us to correct this, and I believe the best thing for us to do is to support the employees and make it back.
John?
No comment.
Tom?
I'm in support of it.
All right, so is there any comment on this particular proposal before I put it on the table for this part of the proposal? Turn myself off for the first time. Is there any comment from anyone on this part of the proposal before I move on? Because I'm going to do a motion on this part, and I'm going to move to the second part, which would be our business administrators. Okay. Then I'm going to move that the Personnel Board support a proposal to the Select Board for funding and movement within grades to the midpoint step, step 8, for all employees that have been in the same exact position for 7 or greater years, effective July 1 of 2025, but no later than January 1 of 2026. And strongly urge them to seek the support of the town at a future town meeting to fund that from a budgetary perspective.
Question on that motion. If they make it.
Second it, then we get a
No,
question.
Second, if they make it January, can we include that if it starts January, that it is made to go retroactive? Because if they don't,
Well,
or did you just cover? does
I
that cover
I thought my language covered it. I mean, I
Okay.
think you would.
I didn't understand that it did.
I think we would say our preference would be July 1st, but
Okay.
obviously, like anything, my goal is to accomplish something.
Right.
Because remember, these employees will then also get, let's just say they make it to step 8. For this year, they would now be going to step 9 next year too, right? So you're going to see the pay bump kind of one on top of the other, even if you ended up with a lesser result, which would be the January 1st date. I'm trying to get something moving, because in some cases, this is a 5-step move for some employees.
Okay, then I will second it.
Okay.
All right,
You already
just
seconded it.
Yes.
Is there any further discussion on the motion? All right, Tom?
I'm in favor. Aye.
John?
Aye.
Brianne?
Aye.
And I am I as well. All right. Next part of this.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. It's the Business Administrator 1 and Business Administrator 2. As you all may recall, this was a topic of great discussion back in the last pay in class study that was done by the Collins Center. We have a general description for each one, and then each department has an addendum for the roles and responsibilities for their specific employee. I think it's time, and I think Mark's memo makes it clear, that we just have a business administrator position, and that business administrator position be at grade 5 and not grade 4. I realize, as simple as that may sound, because, I realize there are some that may be in the business administrator 2 bucket, right? So just in the interest of transparency here, that believe that their roles maybe shouldn't be a 5, maybe they should be a 6. That unfortunately is going to have to be dealt with in a paying class. So there's no way for, I believe, this board to adequately assess that, like, corresponding impact if we were to approve this. My goal is, I think the use of 1 versus 2, candidly, is divisive. It pits, like, certain positions being more important than others. Now, I should be clear, and this should be a discussion, Mark's memo doesn't move, like, if someone was a grade 4, so they're business admin 1, grade 4, step 6, they're not going to move to business admin 2, so grade 5, step 6. They would move to the next category, but here's the important part that I think is accomplished with this, I'll call it immediate move. Everyone would see a pay increase if you're in the BA1, but it gives a much longer runway in terms of Kate's concept of the red circle that she mentioned earlier, is we have some employees that are very close in the BA1 category to maxing out. This is actually resetting their path forward, should they stay in that specific role. Obviously, they get a different role within the town, and they would reset to whatever grade that is, but it is creating a much higher ceiling for what that position may pay in the future, subject to COLA. So I think we're accomplishing a few things with the proposal that's on the table. We can take it further if the board wants to. Is 1, we get rid of the divisive classification of 1 versus 2 and trying to decide which one really falls in 1 versus the other. I think it promotes greater collaboration between the departments. That's not Mark's memo, but certainly an intent here is, I know some of these individuals work in multiple departments, but I think the more that they are working together and can go between departments benefits all of us, right? I think we all know it takes a lot to hire an employee, train an employee, retain an employee, and the benefits in the public sector are obviously borne by the citizens and the residents. And then I think the other justification behind this proposal is really creating a much higher ceiling for these positions, and something to aspire to if that's something someone wants to be in that role for a significantly longer time than they currently are. So I welcome comments or questions on this part of the proposal. Is there any from the board?
No.
There is a differential between departments.
Mm-hmm.
You have some big departments, some little departments. And I think there is a differential, whether you like it or not, or whether we like it or not, on the overall responsibilities of what some of, and I'm just using these departments.
Don't use a department. It's not good, not a good idea. Just say big department, small department. I think we get what you're talking about without calling out specific departments.
But I think there is a difference from a business administrator that takes care of a department that's got 10 employees versus the department that has 3 employees, including the administrator, business administrator. I think there's a difference. I think.
So you're saying you're supportive of keeping BA1 and BA2? Okay. I would, I'm going to react to John's after Tom goes. Go ahead, Tom, do you have any comments or questions on what at least is being proposed?
I have just a general comment that I think it's important for Southborough to step up and be in step with surrounding towns and all the studies that we've done, that we've got to make sure that we attract and retain and grow the best talent within this town. And so I see the need for this request to come through for the town, for the benefit of all the town and the town employees. That's it.
So, John, in the interest of potentially moving this forward, right now the town has distinguished one department. I know I told you not to, but we have, through prior SAPs, the police business administrator is a grade 6, right? All other business administrators are either grade 4 if they're a BA1, and they're grade 5 if they're a BA2. So I think to your comment, there's a few different ways to look at it. Certainly some departments have a ton of employees. Some departments have a lot of walk-in traffic. Those aren't necessarily always the same departments. So one BA may be dealing with 50 people walking into their office in a given day that are, the public, right? Whether it be residents, contractors, just people trying to do business or whatever that department does. So there's never going to be a way to have full apples to apples between each of the departments. Personally, I think we've all heard, I approach it two ways. One as a member of the personnel board, and one as a resident that pays a tax bill like each of you. We have to retain and attract top talent, but we clearly know we have a budgetary issue, as does every other city and town in this Commonwealth, right? Southborough is not alone. Go look around at any other community. And we need to make sure that our employees are teaming and working together. I'm not saying they're not, but are incentivized to team and work together and kind of pull down kind of the barriers of the positions. And I think we as a personnel board, look, we inherited this. This has been in the SAP for as long as, the more we can kind of create the opportunity to do that, I think it not only helps us financially, but it also helps the employees financially, and it reduces transitions and it reduces turnover. I would also acknowledge that the demands of departments change on a regular basis. You could have a new state law come out tomorrow that could completely cause one department to see an influx of demands on their time and all of that. I would think the personnel board in the future can deal with that as it comes. I could go down every department and probably indicate something new that they are dealing with now that they weren't dealing with 1 year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. And I think that's, something that will have to be monitored, but I think it should take extraordinary lengths and a very different sort of process to differentiate one department. I would also say in the future, we may find that larger departments, right, you may be better served with like a manager, right? So a mid-level supervisor that's managing the operations of a department, right? And maybe crossing over different departments and stuff like that. So that may be a way to differentiate these roles going forward as well, as opposed to saying this person only works for this department and these are their four corners that they can work in and they can't cross over. I think we've made a lot of progress with that with a few recent positions, but obviously there are still some departments that by isolation or by, by building they work in or the department they work in, only have enough time in the day to deal with the matters that are in front of them, so. And I'm sure everyone would say they're short-staffed, right, and are working with limited resources, so. Is there any further discussion on this proposal? All right, so this one's gonna require a bylaw change. So I don't think we can do this one retroactively, and someone please correct me if they think I'm incorrect with this, but I think you would need to, the Personnel Board would need to bring forward a bylaw change to remove BA1 at the fall town meeting. That's part of this, but I also think the Personnel Board likely could move all the current BA1s to BA2 at any point, subject to funding. I think there's probably some provisions we could look at there if we were supportive of this. So you're going to see that weaved into the motion I'm going to put on the table for consideration. So I'm going to move that the Personnel Board support removing the BA1 from grade 4 and moving all BA2s, so all BA1s to BA2s effective January 1, 2026, or sooner if allowed by bylaw or other actions by the Select Board or town meeting.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All right. Roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Dorian?
Aye.
And I am aye as well. So that is unanimous. The last item is, as everyone recalls, I did ask Mark to send emails out, making sure that the employees were aware that we were discussing this, right? We've certainly heard from some at various points in time throughout the years, but I wanted to make sure that every single person knew about that, and we got a bunch of letters, right? Those were all submitted in. I tend to agree with Mark's statement that trying to regrade positions at this point, outside of what we just did with the BA1s in dealing with the step issue, I think we're heading into we'd be heading into uncharted territory of trying to do a paying class study with the expertise we have here. And with all due respect to all my friends at the table, I don't think we are the ones that could independently do that fairly and objectively. I think there's tremendous merit in a lot of the information that was submitted, but I do think we need to draw a line in the sand. And I realize that we some of the positions we dealt with the two motions we just made may be up for discussion and further study in terms of whether they're in the right grade. We can reserve judgment on that to a future time. But I also acknowledge that there are some positions that are not impacted by the two motions we took. But I think there's nothing new in the facts that I saw that would warrant extraordinary action outside of paying class study that town meeting was not supportive of doing a year early. So I'm not comfortable doing anything further with the following caveat. If a department head believes that the job description of an employee has changed and has changed significantly and materially, I would remind everyone of our process that at any point in time, whoever oversees that job description can get the approval of the appointing authority, and it can be sent to the Personnel Board. And at all times, the Personnel Board will review mid-cycle whether a grade change is required because of the substance of the job and what has changed. So if anyone believes they're truly in that bucket, I would encourage that department head to come back. Mark, we can work on a communication around that. But absent that, I don't think we have a mechanism to make broader changes without significant external data and support.
I agree.
Tom or John, anything on
that.
I wonder if Mark could fill us in a little more on this new salary tool that he's talked about.
So I'm not going to take, I appreciate that, John. I'm not going to take Vanessa's thunder because Vanessa has been the chair of the Personnel Association for the state. Just recently stepped down, still a member of the board. But she's been working with the Mass Municipal Association and the consultant to put this tool together. It's a compensation tool. It currently exists for schools, school districts. They use it for compensation review. And they're now branching out into the rest of municipal services, public safety, non-union. And I'm going to stop there and let Vanessa jump in because otherwise I'm going too far.
Sure, thank you. So this has been in the works for the last couple of years with some of the MMA groups, in particular the Human Resource Association. We used to have a database that we could log into and then retrieve comparable data on various positions or from various communities. We could customize it that way. That was no longer functioning for the association. So, and they weren't getting the response rate from the communities. You know, as you know, I've talked about before, it's been really hard to get exact comparable data and find out, you know, what's your hire date? You know, why is this person higher there than it is here and so forth. So this firm, who Mark said works with the majority of school districts in Massachusetts, has developed a really sophisticated online portal. It would be based on your comparable communities. They are going out and getting all the data from the other cities and towns, from, you know, the payroll office or the town manager's office. So that weight is, you know, being taken off of us. And if they can't find the information, you know, on their website or by personal contact, they're doing public records requests to collect contracts and get the most up-to-date data they can. So it's much more sophisticated. It's very live too. You know, if we were in negotiations, you know, next year instead, you know, we would be able to plug in if we add this stipend or if we, you know, change this COLA to this, we can get live data, you know, immediately on what the cost impact would be to the community. So it's in process now. They're launching in a number of communities right now. In July, they're going to be adding the non-union information and DPW information. So they're building it out not only in Massachusetts, but preparing to pilot it around the country.
Is there any cost to this?
There is. Because we were a pilot community and helping them to provide some information, we're able to jump into this process right now at a discounted rate at $2,000. Some other communities are paying, you know, closer to $10,000.
Thank you, Vanessa. Just one other point. In your packet, you did have a list of the comparable communities that we have been using, I think, for the past several cycles for paying class reviews. These have been communities that have been suggested to us by the consultants, either for proximity or based on size and structure. One of the things that this consultant will do is they build out your information, but you tell them who your comparable communities are, and then they build out their information so that you then, so it's not like we're just going to have to wait until they get to these other communities that matter to us. I did have a list in your packet. It's probably not today thing, but we need to let the consultant know when we do engage with them and they start to build everything out for us, who our comparable communities are. So if we're going to deviate from this, or we're going to add to it, or want to change something, and again, you know, that's something, it's probably a little bit more of a discussion or something to think about. We just need to be cognizant of this, because once we do it, we can add other communities, but it will be at a cost. So just want to make sure we currently have the 16 communities: Ashland, Berlin, Framingham, Grafton, Holliston, Hopkinton, Hudson, Marlborough, Maynard, Northborough, Sherburne, Shrewsbury, Stowe, Sudbury, Wayland, and Westborough. And you can take a look, think about that, and we can, you know, do some work and see if there's any that we may suggest that either should be switched out based on any changes, or whether there's ones that should be added. So just wanted to put that in your to do pilot.
Yeah, I think for a future board topic, I think it'd be important to know, like, how many non-union employees those towns have, right? And how many residents they're serving. I think we all can figure out kind of the geography factor of community along 495, community along the Pike, or along Route 9, not along any major highway, because that impacts some of the staffing as well. But I think the more data the board has, because off the cuff, I think, we could all react, but I think those are all very different communities, and there's never a true comp. I guess, is there anyone here, just to close out this part of the topic, because John asked the question around, is there anyone that believes we should be doing anything more on this compensation grading step concept beyond the two motions we've taken today, based on the notes that we've received?
I had a question on the police department, lieutenants. Contract that takes effect for the sergeants, takes effect July 1st. And if I think I understand right, a sergeant will be making more money than the lieutenant come July 1st under the current setup.
Mark, can you speak to where that's at?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe it significantly closes that gap, John. So that sergeants and lieutenants will be making, base salary, well, not base salary, but when you look at a lot of the other pieces in terms of overtime and things like that, yes, they've got opportunities to make more than lieutenants.
Didn't you say at a prior meeting that they were considering unionizing, though?
Yes.
So wouldn't we wait to see if they decide to unionize or not before?
I think, I think just simply to put it that they're looking at any options before they take the step of unionizing, which I think is why that request was in front of you.
Okay, so really the request is, because you made that comment in the last meeting, that's why I
Yes.
kind of,
I
like
think
they already had a
they're
resolution?
exploring any avenues before committing to seeking to, unionize as a collective bargaining unit.
my personal view on this is there should always be a gap in supervisory roles within a public safety organization, but that also should have been factored in. I think the select board need to take a view on this too, because they're the ones that ultimately sign the contract and present it to town meeting. So I would think that it's a broader discussion with the select board and the chief, if that's something you want to do, but I don't think we're ready for that today. I don't think we have the right people in the room for that. So we need to understand the CBA. We need to, I think for those that are not familiar with police structure, need to understand the difference between what a lieutenant does and what a sergeant does. And I would think you would also want data around what the normal differential is between those positions in other communities, because unlike most things we've talked about today, I think there are comps that can be garnered with some comp communities. I don't know how we resolve it today, John, but we can certainly put it as an action item, but I think it involves others that aren't here today. Does that work for you? Tom, anything from you?
Yeah, we don't have the people in the room. I don't, I'm of the opinion that it's okay if the sergeant and the lieutenants have a salary range that is close to one another. Those jobs might be just as important. And so I don't see a big
Yeah, I think the
concern
board.
on my part. Yeah, and I don't think it's within our, I don't think it's within our scope of responsibilities to make that determination at this point without any more data, understanding why there is a small gap or any gap in the future.
Yeah,
So I'm going to leave that What
Yeah,
else?
I think there's some education required. I think you've got two members sitting here that have lived and worked in the public safety community and two members that haven't. So I just think we need to have the right individuals in the room for that discussion. So I'm certainly happy to have further conversation just to educate and make sure everyone's working with the same information, and then the board can decide where they want to go with that specific request.
Okay. As you said, there's two members here that have worked in the public safety field. And I don't think there'd be any argument that a police lieutenant has far more responsibility overall the department than a sergeant.
Yeah, but I think we should have the chief come and articulate the job. And the complication here is obviously up, at least right now, the lieutenants are in the SAP, and the sergeants are governed by collective bargaining, right? Right, so that's the only situation we have like that in the town. We almost had it with the fire with the new deputy chief, but obviously that's a contracted position, not an SAP position. So, all right, future agenda item there is where I'm gonna end that discussion. Is there any other business for today?
Quick question. No, I just have a quick question.
Just go to the mic then, Barbara.
I just, thank you. Barbara Sperry, I work for Board of Health and the assessors. I just wanted to make sure the agenda, my addendum that I sent you, that I thought was approved, was not the addendum that you approved, that my board approved and you approved. Just want to make sure that everything's in sync so that, I know it was last minute, but I got this feeling last night. I was like, oh my God, I was at the assessors and I saw that there were things missing out of the addendum that were included with the approved one. Then I went back to your packet that you approved, the one that I submitted, or we submitted.
None of that was referenced as part of any discussion today.
No, but I just want to make sure, because I
For
sent.
future, so I think what, Vanessa, you can, for a future agenda, I think you should get, because I was not part of those discussions,
No.
obviously. So I think just, let's get what was approved and attached to the minutes. Let's look at whatever Barbara sent via email, and if there is action or correction needed to equate to whatever the Board of Assessors or the Board of Health have approved, let's just make sure that everything's in sync. But hopefully it is, and go forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, any other business for today? Well, I'm just going to say on board calendar, I do anticipate we're going to do a quick Zoom meeting at some point between now and end of June. Hopefully, we'll have the final performance evaluations. Or those spots may be sitting with last year's pay rate for a while. And go from there. So with that being said, I will make a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? Any further discussion? Roll call vote. Tom?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Dorian?
Aye.
And I'm aye as well. Thanks all for coming.
Thank you.